Hello everyone, and welcome to another video from the Tiny Menagerie. This is the Dwarf Rasbora, one of the 5 described tiny Boraras species, somewhat commonly seen in the hobby today. And despite the name, these are actually the largest of the Boraras, with large females maxing out at a whopping 22mm, compared to the little exclamation points who only reach about 16mm. So, the biggest of a very tiny bunch. But what do they like to keep, and what kind of setup do they need? Well, Dwarf Rasboras hail from a wide range of Malaysia through Thailand, where they tend to inhabit slow-flowing, murky waters that are often heavily vegetated, both overhead and within the waters themselves, with a lot of falling debris in there as well, creating often some really quite black water. This being the case then, they are not always the bravest of fish. And ideally they do need a setup that provides them with enough cover that they feel they can dart away should trouble come looking for them. I've always found that they are particularly comfortable around floating plants, or at least those that extend right the way up to the water surface, such as Limnophila or the different Rotala species as well. Presumably these give them some protection from kingfishers or other diving predators that may be lurking above. But so long as they have somewhere that they can hide and they don't feel excessively on show, Dwarf Rasboras actually spend the vast majority of their time out in open water. When they're comfortable, they are brave and engaging, usually chasing each other around a little bit and looking for food across the entire water column, right the way from the substrate up to the water surface, so long as there's some plants up there. They do school together, especially when they're first introduced to a new tank, but when they're relaxed they tend to spread out and go looking for food on their own. And in this way they make great tiny dithers for other small but shy fish, things like the tiny gouramis or the smaller apistogramma. If a tiny dwarf is out in the open looking relaxed, then you can pretty much guarantee there's going to be no predators around. One thing to note though is that dwarfs will adapt their colouring to match their environment. So if you're looking to get the very best colours out of them, ideally they need to be over a dark substrate with dim to moderate lighting. In very bright situations they can look almost grey with just a dark splodge on the side of them, and they also tend to exhibit much more skittish behaviour as well. Dwarf Rasboras are also a social species, and they ideally need to be kept in a group size with at least 6 individuals, although it will always be more the merrier with these guys, and they certainly put on a better display if you can accommodate at least 10 of them. Males and females are fairly easy to tell apart, as the males have more red coloration in their fins, while females will become plumper as they fill up with eggs in preparation for breeding. Interestingly though, as they get into adulthood, both sexes will spar with each other in order to establish a very loose pecking order. In females, I've never seen this amount to more than a little bit of fin flaring and some swimming alongside each other, whereas the males will seek to establish a little territory in the tank, often over a patch of dense vegetation that they hope is going to be appealing to the waiting females. Squabbles over good patches of plants can be more intense, especially as the females start looking to lay in the early morning, but even these more heated fights tend to be quite harmless, with no fish actually getting damaged. General day-to-day though, Dwarf Rasboras are very peaceful. They have endearing personality, which is a mixture of being a slightly spunky little attitude with fast movements and an endless curiosity, and yet a very peaceful and gentle way of going about their tank. They're not zipping about all over the place. They are neither lazy nor hyperactive, and they tend to come together in little groups to have a mingle, which is very sweet. They don't particularly spend a lot of time exploring around hardscape. They're not going to be going under logs or into very dark places likely to contain a predator, which is pretty sensible of them, but they also don't stick rigidly to open water neither. They have a very balanced use of their space. They use all of it, but none to excess. And this peaceful nature extends to their tank mates as well, and Dwarf Rasbora certainly can have tank mates. It's not like they're so tiny that every other fish is going to see them as food. Other small fish, such as neon tetras, ember tetras, the little gouramis, such as chocolates or sparkling, small rainbow fish, any other small fish really, so long as it's non-aggressive, is going to be suitable for keeping with Dwarf Rasbora. And this is further helped by the fact they are surprisingly hardy considering they look so delicate. They're able to tolerate a wide range of water temperatures from 20 up to 27 degrees C and a pH anywhere between 6 and 8, putting them very comfortably in that middle ground that so many other fish fit into. Meaning they don't need to be kept in a specialist species only tank and will do just fine in a community with other very small peaceful fish. Though obviously do use your common sense with that one. If you're buying your dwarfs and they are tiny little babies at the moment, then you might want to grow them up to adult size before you do put them in with any larger fish. And also, just because they're small doesn't mean they can be kept in a small space. They are an active species, and so they do require a floor space of at least 40 by 30 centimetres, with a mixture of open and planted areas for them to explore around. And when it comes to diet, dwarf rasboras are very accommodating again. They will eat pretty much anything so long as it's small enough to fit in their tiny little mouths. This includes micro pellets, bits of food flake, frozen or live daphnia or brine shrimp, anything really. And even if the food is too big for them, so long as it's soft, they will try to bite it into little chunks that they can eat. Also, despite being on the very small side, dwarf rasboras are surprisingly brave with other fish, and they can hold their own at the dinner table remarkably well, even when they're competing with fish who are much larger than themselves. They're not as easily spooked as many of the other tiny rasboras are, and so they will stay out in the open and make sure that they get their share. Although again, this is obviously within reason. I wouldn't put them in with a bunch of barbs, for example, who tend to not only charge about the place, but they tend to swarm food as well when it's available. So though, as long as everybody in the tank has good manners, the dwarves will be able to get enough food for themselves. Sadly though, their diet does certainly extend to including shrimplets, and they really shouldn't be kept with a prized colony that you're trying to grow. So long as the shrimplets have got lots and lots of hiding places, you should find that enough survive to maintain the colony, because dwarfs certainly wouldn't tack any shrimp that's bigger than 5 millimeters, so it's only the tiniest of little babies who are under threat from them. But still, it would be better to add some dwarf rasboras to an already established colony of shrimp, rather than trying to establish a colony within a group of dwarf rasboras. Overall though, dwarf rasbora are a surprisingly easy fish to keep, just so long as you don't put them in with any fish that's going to be big enough to see them as food. They are hardy, adaptable, easy to feed, they are active but not hyper personality-wise, and that makes them very pleasing and entertaining to watch as well. Anywho though, I hope you've enjoyed this little video all about dwarf rasboras. Happy fish keeping everyone, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye!